Welcome back to the Rich Eisen Show. Thank you for watching on Disney Plus, the ESPN app, and listening on ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. Rolling into week 7 of the NFL schedule starting tomorrow night, or as you, Brockman, and you, TJ Jefferson, would call it, Friday morning, London time, kicking it all off with the Steelers and the Browns. My guest right now, you can see as part of the Prime Video coverage. More importantly, you can see him co-hosting the Insiders with me on NFL Network Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Ian Rapoport,
let's go.
Joining the show. You got like a
Ian.
golf clap, which I think is enough.
What you want?
It's sufficient for you. Let's start out here. Injury updates, Ian. Emeka Egbuka, one of the best stories in the NFL so far this season. Great guest too when we've had him on the Insiders. Really cool kid. Hurts his hamstring, which Bucs fans are looking at and they're like, yeah, at this point, sure, why not? Everybody else is out too. Right. What is the timetable realistically that you're hearing on Emeka Egbuka being back on the field?
I think probably the most important thing I heard was that he's not expected to play this week. And, hamstrings are weird. We can get injury updates and we can get estimates. And reality is, is it major? Is he going to be out, several months? No, this does not seem like that. Or is he going to be out a couple weeks? Yes, this is what it seems like. So it sounds to me like less bad than the Mike Evans, which was 3 to 4 weeks, but bad enough where they know he's unlikely to play this week. And, remember, it's a Monday nighter, so you're not going to get an injury report today. You're going to get injury reports Thursday, right. And it does seem like everyone's been a little bit closed-lipped about this, which is fine. You don't have to give injury information until you actually have to give it. But, for the Bucs, who might get Mike Evans back this week, at least back at practice, doesn't sound like they're going to have Egbuka on the field.
It seems like a rash of wide receiver injuries, and I'm speaking strictly anecdotally. I have no historical comparisons here, but even looking at, we were just talking about the Cowboys-Commanders game on Sunday. Noah Brown just went on IR. CD, I was told over the weekend, 50-50 chance he's back. We'll see if he practices today. Terry McLaurin is back onto the practice field today. Just feels like there's a lot of moving parts to that position, which also might get a little bit extra action around the trade deadline that's now less than 3 weeks away too.
Yeah, and I would see, there's going to be several receivers who we're going to be talking about around the time of the trade deadline. I mean, you can sort of go down the list of the teams that maybe are not very good or might have an extra receiver. I think the Saints receivers, Rashid Shaheed, maybe Olave would certainly be two to watch. We talked about the Jacoby Myers trade request. We have not seen the Raiders, show any indication that they would move him. At least I have not as of right now. We'll see if that ends up happening. Calvin Ridley's due a lot of money from the Tennessee Titans. Would be surprised if he went. But yeah, I mean, at the position, we have seen a lot of hamstrings, a lot of hip flexors, which is what McLaurin is. Seen some calves. It's certainly seems like the kind of thing where if you're a team that happens to have let's just randomly take it, a back-flipping, touchdown-catching number 5 receiver like maybe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, then you're probably in luck.
You mentioned Calvin Ridley in there, and he's part of a Titans team that my understanding has been, and I believe you've alluded to this on TV as well, over these next few weeks, they're going to be open for business. It's not a fire sale in terms of, hey, just get guys out of here, we'll take whatever we can get. But certainly they know they need a lot of picks. This is a ground-up rebuild. They got to get it right. They're obviously going to have a new head coach after firing Brian Callahan on Monday. But at the same time, if you're trying to get this thing going with Cam Ward, trading one of your running backs, trading one of your number 1 wide receiver, trading anybody else, there is a point at which it's like, all right, is this going to potentially put the quarterback even further behind as we move forward, which creates an interesting dynamic there for Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi.
Yeah, and it does seem like the interest from outside has come on defense for them, not on offense. Now, I did have a team ask about their offensive linemen, and I would be surprised if they traded an offensive lineman, maybe a backup, but I'd be surprised if they traded a starting offensive lineman, even though those guys are talented, haven't played great, but are talented, and probably would get some draft capital because, part of what you're going to try to do the next, however many games is try to get the quarterback better, right? I mean, it should be a desirable job. I think Mike Borgonzi is a really good young GM who is learning on the job. I think Chad Brinker's trying to do a good job of building that building out as far as analytics and infrastructure and kind of catching that place up from, essentially where it has been. But to get Cam Ward playing better would certainly help that job's desirability. The other thing I think it does, like let's say they trade some guys, let's say they trade, Arden Key would be a good example of someone, previous regime, making some money, probably someone they could trade. Well, it's like if you're going to deal with a new staff coming in and having their own vision of players, you might as well give that group picks to build with. So, certainly some trades would make sense for the Titans.
We were live on air on Monday when the Titans announced via press release on social media that they had fired Brian Callahan. Obviously, you and I both know Callie. He's a great guy. You heard Chad Brinker talk about he's a good football coach, too. It wasn't working. They didn't want to do it this early. They just felt like something had to change right now to get the quarterback and the whole team showing more progress. But then the attention immediately turns to who is the next coach going to be? You certainly raised an interesting point here, which is the desirability of a job where there have been 8 to 10 major moves in the power structure on the football side in the past 3 years. But it's still 1 of 32. Cam Ward's got a lot of fans within the NFL. If you are drawing up the perfect head coach to take over the Titans next season, what does it look like or who is it?
So, first of all, I do think it's a desirable job. Mostly because it is a job that's open, right? I mean, that's a very good thing. And if you're a young candidate or even an older candidate and there's a job that's open, it's good because you could get it. And we've seen jobs that are, quote unquote, not great places like the Chicago Bears. And then Ben Johnson comes in, flips Caleb Williams around. They tighten up the room. They improve the offensive line. And the Bears are actually maybe kind of good. So, yes, I would say if you want to look at where to go, it doesn't seem like there's a Ben Johnson in this mix. It doesn't seem like there's a can't-miss candidate. A couple that have been mentioned to me, I would say Matt Nagy, who has a close relationship with Mike Bergonzi, the OC and with the Chiefs. Former coach of the year, was a good coach with the Bears until he wasn't, and sort of has gone back around and sort of use that experience. I'd say he'd be a name to watch. That would be one. Arthur Smith, former OC in Tennessee, another former head coach. Didn't have a quarterback in Atlanta, but someone who's done it and I think was a good head coaching candidate. I think would be a good one. And then you have some other really good coordinators like the Joe Brady of the world. Lou Anarumo is another one, done a really nice job in Indy. I think the main thing for me is everyone's going to focus on who can fix this quarterback and who can get the quarterback playing well. There are plenty of examples of really strong defensive coaches who have turned places around because they just hired good coordinators, built infrastructure around them. Like Dan Quinn is not a quarterback guru, but the Commanders are doing just fine. I would more focus on leading and who can get the room better as opposed to who's the sort of quarterback guru.
Well, and they had that guy in Mike Vrabel, obviously, for a long time. There were various issues, a lot of them generated by Vrabel himself, that ended with him leaving Tennessee and now going to New England, who, by the way, they go into Tennessee this Sunday to face Mike McCoy in his interim coach debut. It is an interesting point, too, because there are not a lot of, just talking to people within the league, as I know you do, there aren't a lot of those clear, dialed-up, hot candidates. Joe Brady is probably the closest thing to a Ben Johnson, but Ben Johnson was the guy for 3 years. And then finally last year was the first time he was like, okay, I'm really going to do this. He had a big offer from the Raiders. He ends up choosing the Bears. You also mentioned Dan Quinn. The biggest hire he had was Cliff Kingsbury, who only became available because things went sideways in his contract negotiated with the Raiders, as you remember, to be the offensive coordinator. Cliff is an interesting one. Because if you think of where Cam Ward had his success going all the way back to Incarnate Word, he was running the air raid offense. It is a very similar type of a scheme to the one that Cliff Kingsbury runs. You could see him fitting in that town. I wouldn't rule that out. I also wouldn't rule out if you want to get back to just, hey, we got to establish a core competency here. Mike McCarthy is a guy who has done it in multiple different places, had a relationship with Chad Brinker going back to Green Bay. It's just a matter of, hiring a 60-year-old coach isn't going to be for everyone. Some people want to hire the younger coach here. It's a really interesting thing to navigate, but in terms of, who the hot candidates are going to be, it's a short list. And I also wonder, as much as we can speculate, Ian, about what happens in some of these places. Obviously, Miami has been talked about plenty through the course of this season. That's another one. Whether or not the potential paucity of clear-cut head coaching candidates might make some of these owners go, you know what? Let's just give another year to somebody because there's just not a guy who we are convinced is a clear upgrade.
Yeah, and, I would say 2 years ago that kind of happened, right? Was it 2 years ago when they're just like, I think it ended up being 4 or 5, right?
Yes, yeah.
When was that? Yeah.
It's cyclical. It averages 7 per year, but there's some years we have 5, and there's other years we got 8 or 9. We have
10, yeah. So the hot candidate's an interesting one for me, right? So, I would have said 2 weeks ago, Joe Brady definitely getting a job. And then, the Bills struggle a little bit, and it's like, okay, well, now he's sort of not as hot. I don't know that any of that matters, to be honest, because what we found is that hot candidates really sort of don't matter very much. I mean, Brian Callahan was hired by the Titans because the Panthers were trying to get him on a plane, I'm pretty sure, to hire him, or at least to give him a really good look. And the Titans were like, we're just going to do this. We're just going to hire this guy. And that's how hot he was because 2 places were kind of fighting over him, right?
And he was the first, I believe he was the first hire in that, first or second hire in that cycle.
I'm pretty sure that was the year that Burrow had the wrist, so I think they weren't in the playoffs. So he had a kind of a jump on people there, if I remember the years correctly. But Liam Cohen is an interesting one for me. I don't know how many people had Liam Cohen as a sort of hot candidate. Turned out, at the end, he was hot for one team. He ended up in dramatic fashion, which we broke, getting hired by that team, and has proved to be a really good hire. So it's really just, and I would say Dave Canales, who a lot of people doubted would be really good, has I don't know that the Panthers are perfect, but they're kind of playing some good football, and maybe look like they could be a team that at least would push for the playoffs this year. So maybe that was kind of a good hire too. And so it's the conventional wisdom doesn't always mean a ton, and the hot candidates sort of don't always work out. So the fact that the Titans have 2 months to figure this out is probably a good thing.
Ian Rapoport, NFL Media Insider, is our guest. Tom Pelissero in for Rich. The Liam Cohen thing, by the way, just on a quick aside, there's various reasons at times that we end up reporting something as spotted somewhere, spotted at the airport, spotted in the building. This was literally Liam Cohen was spotted in the Bucs building the same day or the day after he had, or excuse me, in the Jaguars, but in the day after he had agreed with the Bucs in principle, not signed anything, but they thought he was returning as the offensive coordinator. And then all of a sudden, I think it was 24 hours later, he is walking into the building and is seen by people. And it was like, oh, I guess he's now the Jaguars head coach. That's the wackiness to the way that the process is set up. There's certainly, I think, fair criticism to some of the things in terms of how this manipulates, even if people are not doing it intentionally, the spirit of the Rooney Rule and the way that things are supposed to operate. There are a lot of occasions where we have seen teams operate a certain way where you kind of go, they appear to know who their guy is and they're doing things a certain way here, but they've succeeded in slowing down. The league has the hiring cadence, but the way that these searches play out, it's just completely changed. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think that's, first of all, CeeDee Lamb back at practice. Brian Schottenheimer just announced. We were talking about it earlier, so they said he was very involved in walkthrough.
Well, upgrade to 51%.
Yeah, and, well, I mean, about to play your rival, making sure they know how involved he was in walkthrough, and then he's going to practice. We'll see. Maybe some gamesmanship here. But anyway, it's a good thing that he's back practicing. Turpin also practicing. So anyway, I think with the coaching hires, I don't know if it's good or bad, but almost nobody goes into it being like, well, we'll see how this goes. Now, sometimes you may have a favorite, and you decide during the process that that's not the guy you want, or something happens to go against. I would have called 2 years ago Bill Belichick the favorite to get the Atlanta Falcons job. I mean, would you have agreed, right? I mean, that seems...
He met with Arthur Blank twice, including once on his yacht, and then went through the car wash in the facility. every indication was this is extremely real. And then all of a sudden we took a hard left turn. In his case, it ended up in Chapel Hill, which
has not gone great.
Well, we'll see how long that one actually ends up lasting here. You mentioned, CeeDee Lamb and the Cowboys. Jerry Jones keeps saying, Ian, he keeps telling us, hey, we got the picks. I said it on the Insiders the day of the Micah Parsons trade. I said Jerry Jones has managed to make himself relevant no matter what they do or don't do by virtue of getting an extra first-round pick next year and all the questions that raises. He has made them a centerpiece story in the NFL, even if this team isn't particularly good. Do you buy or sell? We will see the Cowboys make a trade to bring in a player prior to the trade deadline that's 20 days away.
I do think that it is at least a little bit intentional to let everyone know. I mean, yes, it's about the media and to make sure that this segment happens, make sure we talk about the Cowboys during this segment. But I do think some teams like themselves being out there because, let's say you have an edge, and I assume that's where it would be. Let's say you have, Bradley Chubb. I don't know, just pick a random edge. Arden Key, Kingsley Enagbare from the Pack. If you have an edge that you might trade, you're going to call the Cowboys. Now you're going to call the Cowboys. So at least what Jerry Jones has guaranteed is that they get a look at there he is right there.
That's the perfect Jerry Jones photo right there, by the way. That is a man who he's got us talking about the Cowboys. They're 2-3-1, and we're talking about they're going to make a splash move at the deadline, Ian.
Man. Yeah, and I don't even know that it would be a splash, but I could see them bringing in someone. They love defensive tackles. They could use an edge. That would make sense. The only problem is that as an organization, they have done some trades. They sure have done some trades. I think last offseason they did a bunch of trades. They are a team that collects picks. They have drafted very well, with the exception of Mozzie Smith and maybe a couple others. But they have drafted very well, so well that they keep having to pay their guys top dollar, which has sort of led to this mess to begin with. I could see them doing some trades, but I can't see them giving up a ton because they're not a team that likes to just go all in, because there is no going all in the NFL, right? I mean, you always sort of have to collect the picks and make sure that you're investing in your future and all that. So I could see him doing something. I just don't know how. I just don't know that they're going to say, all right, we got an extra one for Micah. We're just going to trade that for whoever. I don't know.
The all-in or not thing is also interesting as it pertains to what the Jaguars are doing right now, because obviously James Gladstone and Liam Cohen were with Les Snead and the Rams. They saw the bleep them picks Les Snead. They also saw all right, now because we did that for a long time, we now need to get rid of all these older, expensive players and get a bunch of draft picks and then have one of the youngest roster and kind of start the process
and hit on all the picks.
The Jaguars appear to be in bleep them picks mode. They appear to be willing, by virtue of giving up the next year's one to go get Travis Hunter, by virtue of a really different deal, the Greg Newsome swap for Tyson Campbell, where they're going, we're going to get rid of the cost-controlled guy for the next several years who doesn't really fit for a guy on an expiring contract who we think does fit. I know this. I will say, James Gladstone has certainly been in contact with other GMs, basically letting them know, hey, whenever you're ready, you got any ideas? I want to talk trades. I mean, he told me that in August. He was like, I can't believe nobody's trading yet. And I'm like, it's August 7th, dude. It'll get going. Don't worry. I would not be surprised at all if we see the Jaguars do something else before the deadline that makes us go, they really are going in to win right now.
Yeah, and I would say, they have a couple areas of focus. I would say defensive line probably makes sense for them. So, there are some defensive linemen who certainly have been in focus and discussed. I could see them adding there. But you're right. I mean, they got a quarterback, and I think Trevor is playing well enough now for them to say, all right, we don't need a number one pick for a quarterback. And my theory, and who really knows, but my theory has been, if you have a quarterback, you don't need a number one pick. You can use that for whatever you want. Whereas why the Cowboys, they traded Micah for a couple ones, I'm kind of all right, are they building up a stack of ones to go get a quarterback after Dak? That was kind of my first thought when I found out about this trade. So I think if you're the Jaguars, it's actually a pretty good team. You got a quarterback. You got all sorts of players at the skill spots. You have edge. You have some corners. You can use picks to load up because you kind of don't need anything, right? There's nothing where you're all right, we have to have a one for this. So they actually have some picks to play with, and I would agree. Like, they've made 2 trades so far. I could see at least one more before this all stops.
You got my wheels spinning. I think you got TJ smiling over there in the corner.
Yeah.
Can't you wait right now, TJ, for the storyline in the offseason when Dak Prescott wins the NFL MVP, the Cowboys roar forward and make the playoffs, and then they trade up to take his replacement in April? The most Jerry Jones sequence of events humanly possible.
That'd be a very
to
Cowboy
make sure we keep
That would be awesome.
your team in the headlines.
That's how you do it. I mean, that's. I mean,
You have
this
been a
is why, like,
staunch defender of the Falcons, and on Monday night, at least for one night, it sure looked like that went great for Michael Penix.
I am the world's
Kirk Cousins over 2 years, but
I am the
Michael
world's
Penix
cheerleader of the Falcons' Michael Penix move.
From draft night.
Nobody besides me, or more so than anyone, I think that was a great move, and I will stand by that. And the Cousins situation emphasizes that. And when this is a success, I will take all the credit. And when it's not, I'll pretend that it never happened.
Ian, great stuff. That is your MO. Absolutely. I appreciate the candor. Thank you very much for being here. I will see you tonight on The Insider, 7 p.m. Eastern Time
Ian goes,
on
real quick, Tom.
NFL.